Hello and welcome back, and that's right, we are continuing our look at the WD Black SN850 for the PS5. There's the benchmark, 6,400 odd megabytes per second, sequential read, lovely stuff there. Today we are looking at some new games, some more aggressive games. We are looking at, for a start, Demon's Souls, one of the launch titles for PS5, and we are going to bench test 3 different scenarios of loading this game from the internal SSD and comparing it against the WD Black SN850. These have been recorded on different PlayStations, and the one on the left, I've got to say, had some real contrast issues, which we will see later in the video and I will talk about. But as we go through all of these different scenarios, remember, what we're looking to see is, do they have the same pace, or is the WD Black quicker? Our first test is going to be loading the game directly from the title screen into a load game into the Nexus world. It's going to take about 2 to 3 seconds, and I think the WD Black there might have got the pinch of the advantage. It might have got the tiniest, merest, tiny nibble of an advantage over the two of them. But again, the loading into the Nexus world, which is technically a smaller area, isn't enough. Next, we're going to look at loading from one of the Archstones. Again, loading into one of the larger areas of the game. This normally takes about 6-7 seconds. So what we're going to do is have a look and see how they compare from the same arch, and I would say the WD Black SN850 was a pinch faster. Fair play to it. It was the quicker of the two there. Not by a huge amount, certainly less than a second, but definitely it was able to load up this area the tiniest pinch quicker than that of the internal PS5 SSD, and full credit to it for that. Next up, we're going to load from another Archstone, once again from within Demon's Souls there. This is the beginning of the game, the very first area. So we're going to compare them and see how they load together. And again, the WD Black there, the tiniest advantage between the two of them. That WD Black has managed just to ever so slightly ebb ahead between the two of them there in terms of those extra little bits of loading milliseconds there. So let's move into our next game, Ratchet and Clank. It's the game you guys requested the most, and let's face it, it does take advantage of the PlayStation's SSD quite a lot. So we're going to be going into that. We're going to be loading from the start of the game after the initial cutscene. We've got a save game where we've got a checkpoint right after the first cutscene, and another one at that big transitional event around 20 to 30 minutes into the game. Again, both of these segments are moderately on rails, but I would argue a lot of Ratchet and Clank is slightly rail based, but these are some fairly graphically demanding areas, even though they are on rails. But loading from the save there on screen between the two of them, and it does look like loading from the internal SSD is a pinch quicker. Something I did notice throughout all of my testing, loading the beginning of the game on the internal SSD, there was always a slight difference of, tenths of seconds, but there was definitely a difference, and there must be a lot of assets here. So I'm quite surprised that every time I bench tested and recorded the internal SSD, it was slightly different by genuinely like minuscule amounts of time from the internal SSD there. So again, there must be a lot of creation there happening for the beginning of the game here, but nonetheless, it did manage to do it that tiniest pinch quicker than the WD Black SN850, but I would argue it's a variable sum given how much flexibility I've seen in that loading. Now, the next segment is the big transitional event running side by side. Again, let's have a look. And again, both of these are being loaded directly from a save spot on a checkpoint. This is still within the game, and I will argue, although this is a rail segment, you do have an element of control. Everything happening around you, it's not a cutscene. All of this stuff is real elements being drawn, just like they said in the PS5 original launch information that included this game being trailered and the transitional events. There is control, as you see there on screen. What I'm doing on either of the screens is different, but there's still a huge amount of information, a huge amount of graphical manipulation that's happening in real time there, but pretty much spot on between the two of them. And although this segment's going to end very shortly with a cutscene, I'm going to say that again, pretty much identical all the way through. I think in early of my testing, only one SSD was really able to surpass the internal SSD performance by the tiniest pinch. I know different websites have reported differently, but we'll have to do more tests later. Next, of course, Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8, is our next test. We've got 2 saves that we're going to be loading from here. One in the castle, a little way into the beginning of the game. We've killed several of the sisters. And another one at the stronghold, where we're going to travel through the entire map to see if we can force the game to do a load while we're running through it. It'll make a lot more sense later on. But for now, let's load that initial save spot there, where we're loading from a save at the title screen into the castle. This area is called Escape the Castle, this save spot. And we're going to load it there exactly the same time. And let's face it, the way the gun that there was pulled, near enough identical. Now, I'm aware the screen on the left is very grainy. Again, this is because we were recording from 2 PlayStations simultaneously to save a bit of time. And the PlayStation on the left, even though it was being played on a big screen through a capture device, I was unaware that the contrast was higher on the other PlayStation connected to that TV, hence the grayness. But this is the interesting one, loading from the same save into the area of the stronghold. What we do here is we're going to run from the stronghold all the way back to the merchant in the village, all the way through about 3 different areas of the game, big areas too, with enemies, with lots of background stuff, animals, the whole works. And what we're doing right now is getting lots of assets being drawn to test all of this data being pulled from the SSD as much as possible. Yes, this is a multi-platform title, so it's not a true PS5 title in its purity, and we are saving Spider-Man Miles Morales for the next video. But I will say, even running through this, where other games might introduce a forced free screen loading, none of that happens here, with both of these running exceptionally well side by side. Of course, they're not like ballet unified between the two of them. We are going to have differences on screen, and yes, the graininess of the capture, particularly on that left screen with the contrast there, does ruin the murkiness of it, but none of that is to do with the SSD. It's all the capture there happening, so we're not going to blame the game or the SSD for what we're seeing there. But again, lovely pacing there, everything's running exactly the same, even the frame rate's exactly the same. But again, of course, we're not able to see that in this recording. But all the way through, making our way back to the merchant, all were there at the beginning of the game, and we're totally fine. The next game, Doom Eternal. We have covered it in other videos, but I did want to revisit it because I think it's very overlooked, as in case of its heavy graphic pulling. This is the PS5 upscaled version with like ray tracing and improvements in frame rate and stuff like that. And we are loading this game from that same save spot. We're loading it from the title screen directly from a save, side by side, on the WD Black SN850 versus the internal PS5 SSD to see how they both compare, directly loading there from the beginning. So there we go, we start loading into it there, and we're going to make our way in now. So I'd say largely the same. We do have to rapidly tap X there, but between the two of them, absolutely fine there. And as we go in, exactly the same. One interesting point there, I don't know if you spotted that, the rapidly tapping of the X, I would argue, wasn't quite the same, but they both loaded up at the same time. The WD Black there did manage a little bit of an edge. It got ahead there. It caught up, even though the rapid tapping of X wasn't quite as uniform. So again, I think that did prove that the WD Black there did, loaded the game a tiniest fraction of a pinch faster. Not a large amount, but definitely a small bit. And finally, we go on to our last game, a popular game. We all know it. It's a GTA 5. But of course, it's GTA 5, which is technically a PS4 game. Let's be realistic. And I say technically, it damn well is. It's not been released for PS5 yet. But it's so heavily played, even on PS5 systems, one look at the numbers will tell you, that I wanted to see how the WD Black SN850 dealt with that horrendous load time. Anyone that's ever played GTA 5, and let's be honest, as I'll mention in other videos, all of us have, we all know that a load time from the title screen is one of the longest load times in gaming. Right there, we're loading from it. They've both started at identical timings, and it's going to be interesting to see how they compare. But already, the WD Black seems to have the tiniest pinch of an edge between the two of them. There's a slight difference there, and that difference seems to be getting a fraction bigger. Let's watch that through there as it goes through the transitions. And yes, these are all publishers and load, but there does seem to be a slight advantage between to the WD Black that fractionally is getting bigger. And I am talking minuscule differences here, but it is different. It is loading those transitions the tiniest pinch faster. Of course, it's a very unique loading time, and there have been improvements by that dude that submitted it, but look at that load time difference. That was huge. That grew over time. The original, ignore that alert there, it's just a save game, it's not effective. But again, I'm pretty sure we all saw that there. The WD Black, it loaded gradually quicker as time wore on. Each of the block stages of the load of GTA 5 there got progressively better by margins each, until those margins added up to quite a clear difference there at load. And I think that's one of the most compelling arguments there in favour of the WD Black SN850. But this has been my second testing of this SSD. Next up, after a few more tests with the individual SSDs, is the big comparison of all of these side by side. Do stay tuned for that. Click like if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe to learn more, visit the links in the description, and I'll see you next time.